director of the Washbourne House, who I had mentioned before is our charity for the day. Please give as much as you can at the front in any way you can. They're selling t-shirts, they're selling amazing chocolate vagina pops. And I've never gotten to say that on a stage in my life, and I never will again, so I had to say it. Amazing chocolate vagina pops. Say it twice. So no, I'm very excited to introduce Kathy. I have gotten to know Kathy because of this event, because of organizing this event, and Kathy has given herself tirelessly for 29 years to helping women in need, and she is truly my hero. So, I'm going to go ahead and introduce her. She's going to introduce the panelists, and please enjoy. We'll see you after.
Hi. I just wanted to say thank you again for all of you being here today. I can't tell you how important it is, especially to the women that are going through it right now. When the women at the shelter and the women in the groups heard about this event, some of them started to cry, saying that it just gives them validation that people are standing up to support them and people believe in them. So thank you again, because this is really important for the community to come together and to say no. And I'm so glad that so many men are here, because unless we include men, we're not going to stop violence. So I just wanted to take a minute just to explain the red figures in the back. Every one of them has a sign on it, and every woman that's been murdered in Ulster County is listed on those signs, so you may want to look at it. And upstairs, we have the Clothesline Project, and we also have a t-shirt for every woman that's been murdered in Ulster County. So I just wanted to bring light to that because I think it's important. And I'd like to introduce our distinguished panel. First, we have Holly Conright, who is the Ulster County District Attorney. And then we have Elizabeth Camoni, who is the Assistant District Attorney. And then we have our Commissioner of Social Services, Mike Iapasi. And then we have the Mayor of the City of Kingston, Shane Gallo. And then we have the Kingston City Chief of Police, Chief Tinty, who I've been told has been practicing the flash mob dance all week and is going to do it with us. So how this works is I'm going to pose a question to the panel, and whoever wants to answer it can. And then when that person's done, if you have something to add, please feel free. So the first question for the panel is, what does our community have in place to respond to domestic violence? Who would like to answer?
You're looking at me? I hope this doesn't establish a pattern. I hope it does. Yeah. All right. Behind you, So the question's, I think, a multi-phase question.
Yes.
I'm here as the district attorney. I think as the district attorney, we do a lot more than just prosecute crime. But I'm going to skip over that part of the question that would be obvious for me to answer, such as prosecute people who commit domestic violence. I'm thinking the question is more geared toward what type of services we have for victims. Is that right? So we actually are somewhat unique. Sorry. I think we're somewhat unique in Ulster County that we don't have one central government agency that responds to domestic violence. Instead, we have a number of agencies that work together in that response. One of the key agencies here is Family of Woodstock. The Family of Woodstock, when I first came on board, I would go out and talk to people that I had met recently because of this new position of being a DA, and say, do you have any idea how much Family of Woodstock does for Ulster County? It's an amazing, amazing group of people, and they do a lot more than domestic violence, but one of the key things that they provide is assistance to victims of domestic violence. We also have the Department of Social Services, which provides a number of services to victims of domestic violence. I'm going to let Mike cover some of that. And we have the statewide and countywide hotlines where a victim of domestic violence can call in for assistance. You've already heard about Washburn House, which is a shelter. It's not the only shelter we have here in Ulster County. But generally speaking, the goal for us on this panel is to, number one, identify where there's been a victim of domestic violence and provide services to that person so that they have, we're going to use terms like empowerment a lot. If we can provide services to the victim of domestic violence to allow that person to feel that they have the strength to break away from the domestic violence, we're halfway home. And that's really been the obstacle we've had here in Ulster County for many, many years. Mike, I'm going to ask you to give us a little bit of information about domestic social services.
Thank you, Holly. Fortunately, I'm sitting next to Shane, so he gave me some suggestions about how to lay the ground. Higher, lower, better? Better, okay. I'll try not to move. But, I do move around when I speak, but I'll just try to stay still. You know, just echoing some of Holly's remarks, at the county level, we have a lot of agencies that basically collaborate. And generally speaking, when any one of our agencies has an incident of domestic violence turn up on our radar, we try to work very cohesively to make sure that we're in contact with each other as quickly as possible to deliver services. More often than not, it'll be something that we become aware of as a result of a 911 call, but it can also arise as the result of a victim appearing in the emergency room, you know, reaching out to a coworker. It could be someone arriving at the Department of Social Services indicating that they've been displaced from their home as a result of an incident. And at Social Services, what we can specifically do is assist that individual with applying for economic support programs that might be able to immediately be responsive to helping them relocate. At the same time, we can talk with that individual about what steps they may be receptive to taking given their particular circumstances. Do they particularly want to become involved with some of the services through Family of Woodstock? Do they want to possibly sit down with representatives from law enforcement and explore the possibility of taking action, you know, that might result in charges being brought? Do they want to possibly access the court system, which Shane is going to speak a little bit to about the possibility of things like orders of protection. So it never just happens that one of our agencies encounters a victim and, you know, just unilaterally takes all the very necessary steps to make sure that there's a comprehensive response. So it is something, you know, that we work on a regular basis together. However we become aware of it, we try very hard to work together, to work quickly, you know, to ensure the safety and the well-being of the victim. We do have something that was established, I want to say back in 2010, which is the Ulster County Council for the Prevention of Domestic Violence. And I'm happy to say that everybody who's here on the panel this afternoon, as well as Family of Woodstock and Kathy's organizations, participate in meetings that are convened every month. And we get together, we talk about how we can improve our system in terms of collaborating and being able to respond in a cohesive and comprehensive way. And I think we've made great strides in the past 3 years on being able to do that. And I'll hand it over to Shane.
In addition to what you just said about we're working on a coordinated effort for the response to domestic violence, and that's a big part of what our Interagency Council on Domestic Violence is dealing with as we speak. Another big provider in this county is the Crime Victims Assistance Program. And there are representatives from the Crime Victims Assistance Program who work with victims of domestic violence throughout the entire course of a criminal prosecution, through family court. There's also another service, the Hudson Valley Legal Services, who provide free legal guidance to victims of domestic violence, and our crime victims advocates right now are the ones who are really helping to facilitate this coordinated response until we can find something else to assist them. There's a big caseload for them. But what they will do is they will work with victims of domestic violence to get them set up with each of the other agencies that Commissioner Iapoce and DA Carnwright have just both spoke about. And I just wanted to add that to what you were saying.
Thank you.
No, thanks, Liz. It's a good segue. With what you heard today from Mr. Carnwright and Liz and the Commissioner, before taking office as mayor, I was employed at the Public Defender's Office. I practiced law. And for a number of years,
You can switch mics, I was having technical difficulties.
seems to have technical difficulties.
It's hard to keep Shane.
Now,
Well, here we go.
I don't even know if I need it. Can you hear me? No, we need it. I'm sorry. Oh, it's on. I apologize. I'm pretty technologically literate. But in any event, as Liz had said, she mentioned family court, and God forbid anyone who's a victim of domestic violence, there's two options, and actually they can be done simultaneously. You can file a charge, okay, in the criminal courts, but you should also file what's called a family offense petition in family court. And suffice to say, once that happens, then the court has authority to order various services, included but not limited, for instance, a report that would be undertaken by social services to determine if there's neglect and abuse from that domestic violence circumstance. So the best interests of the child are protected if there are children involved. From that also, as the Commissioner and Liz alluded to, orders of protection could be issued. From that also, forensic evaluations, mental health evaluations could be ordered, okay, of the parties. From that also, you will receive coordinated services with Family of Woodstock and the good folks at Social Services who deal with this issue every day. So in summary, what people have to get out of this too is that there are a range of services that, as Liz said, fortunately are now being coordinated under the auspices of the council to ensure that there's not only criminal prosecution, but there's also, if there's any issues that could involve other family members and children who experience this, that they could also get the services and the assistance that they deserve and need.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So the next question I'm going to ask is, what do you think are the public health or safety issues that affect our community as a result of domestic violence?
I'll start off on that one. I think that it is much more substantial than any of us can, actually arrive at an ability to account for. Particularly the domestic violence that's going on under the radar. The impact that has on the people who are in the relationship, both the victim and the abuser, their ability to function and participate in society with regard to their employment, their other relationships, raising children, if that's part of their family dynamic, and the economic toll that can take from the inability to continue to pursue activities of that nature that are going to be important to them. The fact that can have an extremely devastating impact on a family that could potentially be broken apart, now having to be distracted by, concerned about, full of anxiety, under enormous stress about what's going to happen, when I return home from work, what's going to happen tomorrow. The inability to establish some sort of stability. And I think where that manifests itself is, with regard to the everyday activities, those of us who have the, ability, to be enjoying a stable lifestyle sometimes take for granted. So that's an observation that I would make, and particularly over the last few years, in an economy that's stressful, that can trigger an inability for individuals to be able to handle some of that stress. Certainly increases in domestic violence, you know, is an area that is going to be something that you'll see happening.
Thank you. Anyone else?
It's something that perhaps you don't realize, but domestic violence is the #1 risk factor with police officers responding to a crime scene. So that's a factor. And the other item that I thought of when we had this question, when you are raised in a home of where there's domestic violence, you learn domestic violence. And that's not only the aggressors, which are primarily oftentimes the males, but the females learn domestic violence. They learn to accept certain behavior. They learn to anticipate certain behavior. And all of that equates to, as they grow into our society, they simply don't become healthy and frankly productive members of society. So this domestic violence is prevalent throughout our community, and it affects us for generations.
Thank you. Next question. What are some of the factors that make it more or less difficult to arrest and prosecute perpetrators?
This is you, kid.
Thanks, boss. So my primary responsibility at the District Attorney's Office is I prosecute most of the violent felony domestic violence cases. And so in my experience at the DA's office, I would say that what makes it most difficult is both the victim's economic reliance on their abuser and their emotional reliance on the abuser. So it's very difficult to attack both of those issues when dealing with a victim. Another thing that is a very big impediment, and Gwen touched on it before, she said when you see something, say something. Witnesses to these crimes of violence against neighbors, family members, friends. All too often I have cases where we know there are witnesses, the police officers have gotten the names of the witnesses, and those witnesses refuse to come forward to testify in court. That is something that I would like for there to be awareness of, and for there to be a change. If you see something, say something. That's how we are going to affect change. And I just wanted to say, just to touch on the last question, when we walked in, we were all rising for something. And I am rising for the children who are affected by domestic violence. And I think that that is something that is very important, because it's those children who are in the home who, as Mr. Carnard has said, both the little girls and little boys who are learning these behaviors that we need to stop them from learning. We need to teach them good behaviors, positive, healthy relationship behaviors. And so thank you for all being here for that. Does anyone else?
As far as the law enforcement response, I can tell you that 20 years ago, the way police officers responded to domestic violence incidents has substantially changed. I'm ashamed to say, back then, you separated the parties. You get there, and the husband and wife were fighting. You'd send the husband out for a walk, call back into service, and handle the next call. And I'm pleased to say that through proper police training and really enforcement efforts throughout the state, that has changed. Officers have come to realize that this is not just affecting those two parties, that it is affecting, that there are additional victims in the children of the family. And what makes it difficult for us is a lot of times the economic reliance is there. In addition to that, I think for us, we're talking about manipulative people. The aggressor is very controlling and manipulative in most cases, and they know what to say and how to say it when the officers get to the scene. And I think a lot of that is being changed by how officers are being trained. I mean, in the police academy now, we have many days of training, review, and there's role play situations being done, and that wasn't the case back in 20 years ago. So we have stepped up, we have made changes, and we're moving forward.
That brings me into the question, what changes have all of you seen in the course of your careers around the prosecution of domestic violence?
I don't often find myself in a position where I put in positive plugs for people up in Albany.
Join the club.
But I will tell you, Albany has got the program with regard to domestic violence. when Liz and I came down here, before we came down here this morning, we were talking about some of the legislative changes that have been made in the last 5 years since we've been working on this matter. And the legislature has given the prosecution such wonderful tools for us to now effectively combat domestic violence. And I don't know that this is the appropriate forum to discuss all of those in detail, but I will tell you that the legislature in New York State has been terrifically helpful with regard to passage of statutes that deal with stalking, that expanded the definition of family, that have given us criminal mischief charges, which don't sound like much, but in the past, if you were in a situation of domestic violence and the aggressor, the victim would try to make a phone call for help and the aggressor would take the phone away. So what crime is that? It's really not much of a crime until they made it specifically a crime, to elevate that to a misdemeanor crime. Little things like that have given us a tremendous amount of help. We've both as a county, as a state, we've talked about orders of protection, and we've streamlined the process there. They've passed, you've heard, if anyone follows anything that we do in our office, you've heard me talk about the strangulation statute, which has been a phenomenal help for us. A great deal of help from the legislature in this regard. And I already forgot the question.
In terms of positive changes, law enforcement in this county, in the years that I have been here, has steadily improved in terms of their response to domestic violence. Chief Tinty has us come into his in-service trainings every year to teach the officers about the needs of a victim when the officers respond to a scene. All too often, victims have told me over and over again that they're not very comfortable when the police come. They don't trust the police don't do anything for them. And we've really worked very hard to try and educate the officers in the cycle of domestic violence, and so that the officers do understand the reactions of the victim when they do respond to the scene, once they can make a determination who the primary aggressor is. And we have seen a very, very big difference in officers' attitudes with respect to domestic violence, and also with respect to domestic violence cases where we suspect a victim is not going to cooperate. So now we're training the police officers, when you respond to a scene, let's collect evidence so that if this victim does not cooperate for the number of reasons that a victim may not cooperate, that we will be able to go forward with the prosecution without the victim's cooperation. And we've had a number of successful victimless prosecutions. One in particular, the defendant is serving 7 years in state prison for assaulting his girlfriend. She did not cooperate at all, and we were able to convict him without her cooperation. And so a nod to the police department that they really are improving their mentality, which is very key in my opinion.
At social services, I can say that there's probably 3 major areas that over the last 20 years I've seen major improvements. Just with regard to the economic support programs that we administer, where applicants will come in and apply, the increased awareness and sensitivity of those frontline caseworkers when they're doing face-to-face interviews with individuals, to be able to identify that this might be someone who needs to have somewhere to turn because they've arrived at social services and are looking for economic support, but getting to the heart of the reason why they're there. That's been really incredible, and the caseworkers who administer these programs, have been, really making a great contribution in trying to encourage and support applicants who need help. Just echoing remarks that Liz and Shane had about what's gone on in family court and also in criminal court, and where children have become part of this important equation. I can say that 20 years ago when I started at social services, it just wasn't as much on the radar that children who are in an environment where domestic violence is taking place between their custodians could be as negatively impacted. There's been so much increased awareness about that. You would arrive and see a child that, from all appearances, has not been neglected, is not being abused, is not injured, but the impact on their psyche over the course of time, watching, how their custodians are treating each other is a major area where we have made great strides in improving our response. We frequently get state central register reports about the fact that there's domestic violence in a household, and this is having a major impact on the child's ability to thrive and to evolve in a healthy way. And then just overall, to the degree that our county government has embraced and made raising awareness about preventing and not tolerating domestic violence. Our county executive, Mike Hine, has supported the establishment of the Interagency Council. He's also supported raising awareness with regard to having the county participate in events of this nature and other events, particularly during October, which is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. People may have noticed that there are billboards in our community indicating that we have zero tolerance for domestic violence, and anytime we're able to raise awareness, anytime somebody reads that message and digests the message and then acts on it when they see something happening, is a major step in the right direction. So I just think the sensitivity to it, the awareness, the need to respond, to assist, it's really been remarkable. It really has been.
Just to add to what Michael, Commissioner, who as 20 years ago, he was one of the council in DSS, and I had the privilege of also working with him on various cases. And I can see in just the 11 years or 10 years that I was in family court, the changes are remarkable in the sense that there's a real listening to each agency and a real understanding and listening between family court judges, the criminal courts, and then linkage between the attorneys with the DA's office to really coordinate and be effective on behalf of the victim in terms of the legal process. But what it's also I've seen change is not only the awareness and sensitivity, obviously by other elected officials, and Mike Hine deserves a lot of credit because he really got it quick in what he's proposed and what he's done in the past few years. But it's very gratifying to see the coordination between not only the attorneys, the courts, social services, mental health, and then outside agencies like Family of Woodstock and others, okay, who are very involved in this process. So I would agree that in the past 10 years, and then you couple it with, as Liz pointed out, the increased awareness on the part of the PD, which I know the chief can speak to, about how officers now are being trained to try to deal with the issue, as Holly said earlier, which is basically a legacy of domestic violence that's generational. So I think I'm very pleased to see these changes, in the last 10 years in the way that we're working together, okay, with all these different agencies.
I know from our end of it, as I mentioned before, 20 years ago it was handled differently, and through training and what I consider to be progress in this area, we've managed some successes. Officers carry their camera phones with them. The technology within the car allows us to transmit data, so we're aware of it. The state has a new central database that we can access for orders of protections. Those are the things that are important, but more importantly is to make sure the officers understand that it is their initial handling of the domestic violence in that house that can prevent or reduce it from happening again. And I think that's huge to get across to officers. I was very fortunate and blessed to never have to have seen that until I became an officer, and to be exposed to an environment in the city where we're handling, I think it's over 500 domestic incidents a year. Very difficult for someone like me when I was younger to walk into a family and not understand, really completely at odds with everything I was raised with, that this is the person that claims to love you. Why is he doing this? And now I think officers are realizing that we just can't say, okay, take a walk, and that no longer is the prosecution end of it, having them come in once a year. Liz doesn't take enough credit for this. Really, they look forward to that training to be updated on a regular basis for the information. We recognize if we handle it right the first time, that there will not be a second.
So we're going to have to close for now, and I just wanted to ask you all if there's anything else that you can think that we can do to help reduce domestic violence. Anything that you haven't said yet. End the war.
You can do what you're doing right now. That's really what you can do. You can make domestic violence. Years ago, people didn't talk about breast cancer. It was a private issue. Think about how silly that is. Years ago, people didn't talk about domestic violence. Domestic violence was a bedroom issue between husband and wife. Domestic violence is an issue for all of us. It's an issue for us as a community. And events like this that can bring awareness out to the public and make everyone concerned with domestic violence is the only way we're ever going to have a change in this. And the other thing you have to do is you got to give me another list.
We did want to mention something to go off of the last question about the changes that we've seen in the community and in our county. Very recently, the Ulster County Family and Child Advocacy Center was finally opened in Ulster County. A lot of work by our district attorney, Mr. Carnwright, and Mr. Iaposi and Mike Hine. And it is a place where child victims can go, and they have a very safe environment. And the men and women who work there, and I'll let Mr. Iaposi speak to that because it's part CPS, part law enforcement, and they're also advocates. They work incredible hours all the time to help keep our community safe and help to be there for these child victims who are experiencing domestic violence in their homes and who are victims of sexual assaults. They also deal with adult victims of domestic violence, and I'll let Mr. Iaposi speak to the CPS aspect of it.
Thanks, Liz. Yeah, the establishment of the FCAC, Family, Children's and Advocacy Center, was achieved in 2012. Just absolutely enormous accomplishment. I would also like to give credit to our Deputy Commissioner, Barbara Sorkin, who's in charge of services and at DSS, who worked tirelessly in connection with achieving this accomplishment. It's a location where several disciplines come together to be able to respond cohesively to cases that frequently involve domestic violence, where children can be brought to be able to receive therapy, be examined, interviewed, and all of the disciplines can be at the same location to reduce the secondary trauma that a child is going to be susceptible to as a result of all of these agencies needing to perform their investigative functions to try to resolve and address the underlying incident that's taken place. So that's just been an incredible accomplishment, and I'm also happy to say we've had a domestic violence unit here in Ulster County for many, many years, dating all the way back to when Tom Roach was Commissioner of DSS, and I think our DA back then was Mike Kavanaugh. They supported this, they had the vision and insight to see that it was necessary, but all the disciplines were spread out, and that made the delivery of the services a little bit frantic. So what was achieved in connection with establishing the FCAC was just really, really a tremendous accomplishment. And just to echo what Holly said, we're all here. It's something we're all very committed to. It's all on our radar. I mean, I think change is effected when we as individuals recognize that something might be happening and take action. And sometimes taking action may take time. It's not an easy thing to address a friend or a neighbor or a coworker, but if you take the time and put some effort into maybe encouraging, supporting, and urging them that there is help available to them, just helping one individual out of a situation like that can just have such an incredible impact on all the people around that person. So I think we're going in a great direction. And I look forward to continuing to work with all the people that are on this panel who I've been working with for as long as 20 years. And I think we're really making progress.
I just want to thank everyone for coming, and as the panel, other members have stated, without your participation, there won't be further awareness about this horrible problem. And I want to thank Holly, or actually Zoe and the others who organized this event, but I want to thank Holly and Liz and the others at the DA's office for doing an outstanding job and being very sensitive to the problem, to say the least, with what you have to work with. So you're doing incredible work. Mike, Commissioner, as an attorney and now as the Commissioner, you're continuing your good work, and your people deserve a lot of praise too. And Chief as well, I want to thank you on behalf of the city. You indicated we have 500 of these cases or calls a year. That's a problem that really is just, well, you're doing a heck of a job. So again, thank you all, and as Michael and the others have stated, and Holly made it explicit, please keep it going. Let's raise awareness about this problem.
And I just want to say thank you to the panel. I feel really lucky to live in Ulster County and to have all of you working on this problem with us. Thank you so much.